A friend's baby shower was the last place Brett Caslake expected to encounter a ghost. The gauzy apparition wafted into the stylish living room, as if blown in on a breeze, the moment the pregnant guest of honor began to open her presents. Or perhaps the ghost had been loitering there by the mahogany bookcase, long before the attendees started arriving, and it was just the gentle gust from the open window that had stirred the form, giving its edges depth and shape. The moment Brett saw the ghost, she knew she'd stupidly let her guard down. She'd neglected to prepare herself to enter a structure she hadn't been inside before, and it was a mistake she hadn't made in a while. The high-rise apartment was a brand-new building, and that fact had lulled her into dismissing the hairs that had prickled on the back of her neck when she'd stepped inside. She'd remembered too late that a building didn't have to be memory-laden for a ghost to take up residence. It just had to be located at a place where the unseen membrane between this world and the next was delicate. As Brett silently berated herself for such a lapse of judgment, she made a second, far worse gaffe. She made eye contact. When their pupils met, the ghost, an adult female in a plum-colored dress of a vintage Brett couldn't readily identify, opened its mouth in surprised alarm. Brett half expected it to shriek from across the room. Ghosts, at least the ones Brett had come across, reacted to someone like her the same way people tended to react to them, with alarm. A yelp or two was customary, or a fearful shudder, or a perplexed stare of disbelief. Ghosts were unaccustomed to being visible when they didn't want to be seen, and they didn't always like being found out. For Brett, the feeling was mutual. Ever since a disastrous episode in college, she'd endeavored to ignore anyone she encountered who wasn't mortal. And avoiding eye contact was the first and best way of doing that. Stupid, stupid, stupid. She looked away and focused her attention on Lindsay, who was opening a gift from Brett's mother, Nadine, who sat a few chairs away. Nadine and Lindsay's mother had been best friends for years. A chorus of monosyllabic expressions of delight erupted from the other women in the room as Lindsay held up a trio of tiny smocked dresses, white, yellow, and pink. "Oh, Nadine," Lindsay gushed, "I love them. They're adorable." The ethereal image in the corner vanished, but only for a moment. Less than a second later, it materialized in front of Brett, practically atop the gift pile on the coffee table. If it had had form and weight, it would have scattered the presents at everyone's feet. Brett had felt its energy as it made its move, and as she quickly cast her gaze to her feet, she emitted an involuntary gasp. "Not here, not now," Brett inwardly demanded, but she only wished for a mere snatch of a second that the ghost would hear her silent appeal. Having them inside her head would be a nightmare. They always wanted something. Always. And half the time, they didn't even know what it was. "You are so very welcome," Brett heard her mother say. But she could tell that Nadine was looking at her, not at Lindsay. Her mother had heard her gasp. Everyone probably had. At that very moment, the ghost lifted a pale hand toward Brett. The apparition's fingers were visible at the edge of Brett's limited field of vision as she stared at her shoes. She sucked in her breath even though she knew it would not touch her. She would be as flimsy to the ghost as its form was to her. There was an odd pause as the attention in the room swung in Brett's direction. If she raised her head, she and the ghost would be at eye level, and there would be no way to pretend there was nothing there. At least there was no animosity emanating from the vaporous presence in front of her, thank God, and no evil intent. The apparition was not something dark and malevolent. It was merely an uneasy earthbound soul, stuck in a dimension it should have left long ago. Harmless. "You all right, Brett?" her mother asked. Brett turned her head toward her mother, keeping her gaze as low as she could. She put a hand to her brow. "Just a bit of a headache. Don't mind me." The ghost leaned in, more curious now than startled, and Brett felt the skin on her arms and legs grow warm. as though electricity were passing through her limbs. She closed her eyes. "You want an Advil?" said Lindsay's best friend Allison, who was hosting the shower. "I have some in the kitchen." Brett nodded, her eyes still closed. "That would be great.